Hey, it's Kevin with the New Warehouse Podcast, bringing you a new episode today. And on today's episode, I'm going to be joined by Marinus Bouwman, who is the product manager and business development over at KNAPP. And we are going to talk a little bit about KNAPP, what they do, and what he's focused on over there. But we're also going to talk about some of the foundational elements of automation, which little teaser is data. And we've talked about that on the show before, but we're going to dive a little bit into that and talk a little bit about master data and how KNAPP is bringing to market this product software that helps with that. And we're also going to dive a little into MFCs, micro fulfillment centers, and talk about what does that term actually mean in 2025 and how is that evolving. So, Reese, welcome to the show. How are you, sir?
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Definitely happy to get you on. Happy to talk about this. Very interested in data. Yeah, I believe in data. I'm a data believer, I will say, which I think is
It's not
a
supposed to
good
be a
thing.
religion, right? But yeah, it sometimes turns into
Definitely.
one.
Yeah, absolutely. So very interested in getting into this conversation with you and
Mhm.
hearing your perspectives on it. But before we get started and get into that conversation, for people that aren't familiar, why don't you tell us a little bit about KNAPP and also tell us a little bit about your role itself and what you're focused on, because KNAPP covers quite a few things, I believe.
Yeah, with pleasure. I joined KNAPP about 7 years ago now, 2018, February 2018, and have been a software product manager ever since. First product I worked on was Keysoft Packmaster, which basically calculates how to build mixed pallets. And
Mm,
through that, we figured out that we need a lot more information than just dimensions and weight. You need to know crushability of something. Is it tiltable? Is it maybe transparent? Has it a flat surface or not? So we found out, or I found out, that we need a lot more good data, a lot more attributes, but also in high quality, which led
mm,
to the creation of the product Keysoft Genomics, for which I'm also the product manager. And as of 2 months ago, I'm also working on business development for our MFCs, our hyper
okay.
local solutions, if you like. So MFCs, CFCs, and it's been great fun. KNAPP is a great company to work for. I think like 15 years ago we weren't that well known in the States, but right now we've done
Mm,
quite some interesting projects with companies like Kroger, Walmart, and it's been a roller coaster. Obviously, the pandemic was an interesting time. As well as the after pandemic time. The subsidiary I work for is mainly focused on food retail. So KNAPP works in
mm.
different areas like healthcare, fashion, general retail, but I'm mainly busy with food retail projects. And I think it's a very interesting industry to work for.
We see that, this automation is kind of everywhere, right? I mean, we see the videos, whether it's on LinkedIn, it's YouTube, at these trade shows in person. Obviously, some very cool things being done, very visual in that sense, which I think captures people's attention initially. But obviously, there's a lot more that goes into making those automation projects happen, and those physical aspects move and do what they do. So tell us a little bit about, what kind of goes into behind the scenes of some of these automation projects or just these solutions in general.
Yeah, I'd love to. I mean, as you said, I mean, when KNAPP started doing more and more automation projects, I mean, we grew rapidly for the first time, I think about 40, 50 years ago, mainly in healthcare, with our A-frames, and then it became big with the whole shuttle systems, good to persons,
Mm,
and this was back then. This was the main focus. How can you get more steel in there? How can you get more innovative robots? But as you mentioned, there's so much going on these days. If you build automation that is not necessarily related to the machinery itself, especially if you look at e-commerce or e-grocer, location becomes all of a sudden extremely important, right? Where do you put an MFC? Where do you put a CFC or fulfillment center in general? It is different
mm,
than with DCs. Getting the right people to organize something like that, it is there's so many things that you need to think about, and in an industry with a very low margin, uh, adding new processes, selling products maybe slightly cheaper is a big risk. It's something people want to think about. You mentioned it briefly before. Master data has become a big
Hmm.
topic all of a sudden. It's not just dimensions and weight anymore, as it was in manual warehouses. Now we need roughly about 60 attributes in order to build a pallet, a mixed pallet in food retail with a robot. And you simply don't get this information very easily, neither from the suppliers nor from the retailer. So you got to come up with ways of getting these attributes and also getting them in the right quality. I guess that was one of the biggest things that surprised me 6 7 years ago when you started working with customers, with clients. They would always come and say, our data is fine, data is not a problem. And then you would run some simulations, you would do some pre pallet building simulations with Packmaster, and you would see that half of the dimensions were just 1 inch or 1 millimeter, which obviously couldn't be true. And that's just the dimensions that you can't get right. So that is a big challenge for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I love that you said that the customers would be like, "Oh yeah, there's no problem with our data," right? And then I'm sure you uncovered some things there, but tell us a little bit about that because I think too as we see a lot of transition, and I think you mentioned the food retail space, right? I mean, there are certainly a lot of I think entities, warehouses, whether they're 3PLs or older facilities and companies that have been around for a long time, kind of in that space. y- they may think that yes, their data is fine, right? Like you said, because the way they've been doing things, which may be very manually,
It's
didn't necessarily
fine.
call for so much intricacies in that data. So, tell us a little bit about what kind of from a master data perspective. I mean, what typically is kind of overlooked, and why does it matter to get that in line before trying to start to automate some of those processes?
I think if you look at the data that they are familiar with, like maybe a barcode or like I said before, dimensions, the level of accuracy that you need for a highly automated DC or FC is completely different than for a manual one. If in your manual warehouse you maybe have your dimensions off by 1 or 2 inches, not many, not much will happen. You can still fill your high base. You can still do your picking. There's nothing going bust. If a robot thinks that something is an inch smaller, but in reality it's not, it will run into it with, I don't know, 2 3 tons of force. The product is broken, and especially in food retail,
Mhm.
you have quite some stuff to clean up then. So you have a lot of downtime. Um, like I said before, GTINs or UPC codes. In the past, maybe like 20, 30 years ago, it wasn't that strict. So you could, suppliers were using the same barcode for maybe 2 or 3 products at a time. And so a lot of systems have legacy barcodes in them now. We sometimes get a telegram for an item that has 40 barcodes in there. But we all know that there's only one physical barcode on the product. So which one do you take? Um, those sort of things, just getting this unique identifying in place is a tricky one. Which is, by the way, one of the reasons why we started working very closely, very early on, with organizations like GS1, Global Standard One,
Mm.
which, especially in food retail, are building the standard worldwide for that industry, but also other industries. But they also say they have an issue with the quality of the data. So on the one hand side, you have a number of attributes that you need, but you also need a quality in a certain quality range. Like I said, dimensions. It's typically not much more than 5 millimeters. What is that? Quarter of an inch, something like that.
Mm.
That you can be wrong. Weight, similar stories. We've heard stories of people, getting having their weight wrong in their WMS system, and all of a sudden, none of the pallets would go into the high bay because it thought it had 20,000 tons in it instead of 200 kilograms. and
Yeah.
and then you're there, and then the robot says no, computer says no. So it's a different world, for sure. um, there's a lot of people working on master data. You got data
Mm,
managers working on PIM systems, CRM systems, ERP systems, and they're doing a great job. And it's complex enough already as it is. The focus there, I think, is very often towards POS or end customer. And what
mm,
we're seeing now is that we need an additional category of master data called, well, we're calling it automation master data, to have all these attributes in there in a certain quality. And we hope that we can get more data managers on board to help us with that. Because the earlier on in the supply chain we can get that right, the more we'll benefit from it. Right now, we're doing it the other way around. We're getting this data when the item hits the docks in the automated warehouse, and that's pretty late on in the process.
mm. Interesting. Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's a really great point there where you mentioned that, the weight is off and, all of a sudden, they think that this pallet weighs 20,000 tons, right? But if you think about, a manual operation, well, a human is going to say like, oh, I know this doesn't weigh 20,000
Yeah,
tons, right?
yeah,
So, I'm just going to navigate around that and, still get the task done. But the robot, right, it's very black and white in a sense, right?
it
It's
is.
either can fit in my parameters or it cannot fit in my parameters, right? And so that creates a delay, certainly in downtime, which obviously is costly, no matter how long it is. So, very interesting there to hear that, and I think that it's certainly, and I've talked to people and heard about different projects. Certainly something that has come to light. I think is that there's a lot of bad data out there in a sense, or just the quality is not as great. And I think about in my career we had one situation where we would induct these cartons onto the
Yeah,
conveyor, and they would go around zone pick type situation. And it was a book publisher, and every year we would do calendars as well, and we would get the big desktop calendars. And the one year, they didn't update the DIMMs on them, so you watch the conveyor, and there's all these small boxes with, like, big big, wide desktop, calendars just riding on top of them, and then and I was in charge of quality, and they would come to our mezzanine, and
of course.
and we'd have to swap them all out and get them fixed. So it can add up like very quickly when you have that, mix of automation and human element too as well. Because the human's like, oh well, this is what it's telling me to do, so I'm gonna do it in a sense, right? And so there's two sides there. I think where you have fully automated, where the robot, right, is just gonna say like, oh no, I'm stopping, like I'm not doing anything,
Yeah,
and human is interacting with the automation like, well, this is what's telling me to do, right? It's just a system smarter than me, so I'm just going to do what it says. And then you run into these issues. So tell us a little bit about how your focus with Keysoft and KNAPP. I mean, how do you guys help tackle this, and how do you prepare people to undergo kind of this data cleansing in a sense before doing like some type of automation project?
yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a lot of education that goes with it. So you
Mm,
have to talk to people. They have to, sometimes feel it, find out that the data might not be good enough. We do upfront data analysis, so people can give us their current master data, and then we do a quick couple of test runs with it. We send over measuring devices like multi-scan, which basically measures the dimensions and weight, and then connected with our software Keysoft Genomics, so people can then use for 2-3 months, so to get a representative amount of data in there, so we can do an even more in-depth analysis. We did, and we're still doing pilot projects with retailers and the local GS1 member organizations to basically see where along the whole supply chain data gets corrupted or quality is lost. So it's mainly about bringing attention to the problem and also proposing lightweight solutions without them having to invest millions of dollars in doing that. So it's a lot of
mm,
manual work. It's a lot of hands-on work, but that works if people actually see where the data goes wrong, and then what the effects of that are, it immediately changes their whole mindset, and it's a different conversation afterwards. So that is very rewarding, I would say. But
Mhm.
yeah, it's it's not a straightforward one. It's not a straightforward one.
Mhm.
If you go and talk to the data people, they're like, yeah, we're not an automation. We don't want to talk to you. If you talk to a warehouse manager, he's like, yeah, master data, I'm getting that from somewhere else. I don't want to talk about it. It's like, well, if you don't get it right, the 150 million machines you just bought are not going to work. So we might want to have
Mhm.
a talk about it.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I think there's is you're kind of seeing a bit of a change there. I think where because I've been a warehouse manager before, and I've had managers underneath me and supervisors, and certainly dealt with the people that are like, oh, I don't care about data, or I don't like data, and no, do not show me an Excel spreadsheet. Like, not worried about that. Like, I just want to be on the floor and just manage the people,
Yeah,
and which is which I think was fine, right? But I think you're seeing where, you need to be more in touch with that data and more in tune to be able to navigate that. And ultimately, I think we're still very early, I think, in penetration of automation as a
absolutely.
whole, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think you see two big changes. First of all, we like in the past, and or we still do. We measure every item probably 100 times when it goes through a fully automated system. Every time something
Mm,
goes from the high bay to the DPAL and then goes into a shuttle system, etc. There are measurements there, there are sensors there, and in the past we would just measure it, check it, okay, and then throw it away. Um,
mm,
Now we are saving this data in Keysoft Genomics. We're actually gathering it to start learning from it, and all of a sudden you see, instead of a standard histogram that you would expect from a dimension distribution, you would see multiple populations in there because the customer has multiple suppliers who have different molds for their PET bottles. That's one part of it. Another part of what we started doing at KNAPP is what we call the so-called MSCC, which is our
mm,
multi-site service platform, where we do uh, also gather information, especially on machines. How often has it been used? How often has this conveyor been used, etc., to basically give feedback to our customers, saying, okay, in the next 5 days, this specific conveyor or this specific part might fail because you've used it so many times. If you replace it now, it's only going to cost you 2 minutes because that's replacement time. You have no downtime instead of waiting for it to break. Um, so, yeah, we're starting to learn to get a lot more out of data, but I totally agree with you. We're just at the beginning. It's
mhm,
it's not just a warehouse, is it? You got this whole circular economy thing coming in our direction, where we need to know at any point in the supply chain what is what and where it is and what its condition is, even if it's being reused. And so it's everything's going to have to work so much closer together that I think not doing nothing is not an option.
mm. Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's, getting more and more the case too. And we see, certainly more solutions coming to the market as well, which I think, is just justification that people are asking for it, or,
Yeah.
or there's demand for that to be able to happen. And I think that's quite inevitable. So very interesting there on the data side. And you mentioned in there a couple of times these MFCs or micro fulfillment centers. And I think we've certainly seen a lot of micro fulfillment centers, companies focused on those, come and go at this point as well. There's been a lot of up and down, I
Yeah.
think, and certainly we see those tending to be heavily automated too, as well, in a lot of scenarios. So tell us a little bit about, because you're heading up the MFC part of KNAPP as well, right? So tell us a little bit about, as we're in 2025 here. I mean, what does an MFC even look like, or what does that mean these days? Because I think there's a lot of varying definitions I've seen.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think it's also a term that is no longer fit for the market. So I think when we started
Mm,
working on these type of solutions, 2018, 2019, we basically called them MFCs, micro fulfillment
yeah.
centers, because the idea then was, I just build them next to a supermarket, and all of a sudden I can do e-grocer or e-commerce. Um, we've built quite a lot of them, some
Mhm.
very successful, some a little bit less successful. And what we've learned over the years is that it's not just a question of, hey, how big does it need to be, and how much can I put in there, and how much can it grow over the next 2 years or 5 years, but because it's so close, so hyper local, as we call it, to the customers. Um,
Mm.
Costs, last mile delivery topics. How do I deal with my margins? Do I give the transportation and last mile for free? Do I charge people for it, which then influence maybe their buying behavior, inventory management? All of a sudden, I need to deal with different temperature zones. It's a very, very, very complex system on a very small surface, mainly operated by people who might not be used to the automation degree. And what we've also seen is that, some actually did want to buy or build a very small one with two aisles next to the supermarket,
Mm.
and some wanted to build one in the middle of five supermarkets that look more like a small CFC, if you like. Um,
Right.
so we actually stopped using the term MFC per se, and really go for highly automated solutions for the hyperlocal e-grocery business. So that's it's a mouthful, I know, but
Yeah.
unfortunately, it is that complex. Our customers
Mm.
are struggling with a lot of questions, and our solution, the hardware that we're delivering, is most of the time just a very small part of it. It's not nice that I say that, because for us it's very important, but for the
Yeah.
retailer, what? How do I get these people there? How do I train them? What do I do when something doesn't work? How do I do the last mile topics? It's so much more complex than a regular DC. You need the right team for that. You need the right people to pull that off. It's difficult, yeah, but that's, I think, because that was what your question was. What is MFC in 2025? I think it's no longer
Mm.
just an MFC. I think it's a range of solutions from very small to almost as big as a CFC, depending on where you want to put it in your system.
Mm. Interesting. Yeah. Yeah. And I think it is interesting too, because we think, oh, smaller fulfillment center, easier to handle, right? But as you said, there's a lot of complexity, right? Especially when you're looking at from a grocery perspective, right? You have those temperatures for sure, which make it complex, and then you have timing of when can things go out, and do you get congested, do you get backed up in that situation? So, I mean, where do you see? I guess the idea of we said highly automated, hyper local centers. I think I almost got it there. Is that
It's not
definitely
that.
a lot more than MFP, right?
Yeah, I might need to work on that a little bit, marketing
Yeah.
wise.
So I mean, where do you see like the right fit for these? I mean, like what industry does this make sense? Because we certainly saw companies that were just trying to do micro fulfillment to do delivery in 15 minutes, right? Or deliver something in 2 hours or same day. And some of the things that I think got into the mix there were things that maybe people were like, well, I don't need this in 2 hours, right? Like I'm fine ordering this normally. So where do you see kind of like the right fit for this type of solution? Is it just in the grocery industry, or do you see other applications where is like what type of, I guess, companies or products should be looking to have this type of setup?
I think that's an excellent question. Anything that goes with e-commerce could use, at some point, probably hyperlocal solutions like MFCs, CFCs,
Mhm.
because I mean, we before the pandemic, it was going up. I don't know, it's something like 3, 4, 5% a year, the whole e-commerce business. Some countries were far more uh, well adapted to it more easily. Like we done some stuff in Israel that went really well. I know that some Asian countries are really picking up on the e-commerce stuff, and they have high percentages. Whereas
mm,
Central Europe and I think also the States back then, it wasn't that much. But it was going up slowly. Then you had the pandemic where we couldn't do anything else but order online. It went up crazy, and all of a sudden we all thought naively, I think, that this would go on forever, and obviously it didn't. When the pandemic went down, people went out and went shopping in brick and mortar again. And somebody told this to me a month or so ago, and I think it's absolutely right. The buying behavior, especially in food retail, to change people's buying behavior, apparently is something deeply psychological and very difficult.
mm,
So you saw your mother go to the grocery store, your grandmother goes to the grocery store, you go to the grocery store to pick up your groceries. You don't get them online. You might get your toilet paper, but you don't do the rest. It's in ourselves. I don't know. I don't know if
mm,
that's true or not, but what we see is that the behavior is very different per country. In certain countries, people pick it up and it goes faster. In other countries, it takes a longer time. But
mm,
having said that, it does go up. It goes up every year, the whole e-commerce business, the whole e-grocer business. So I think eventually it'll be interesting for all branches. Of course, we do a lot in food retail, but I think general retail is going to pick up more. Um, Obviously, fashion is doing this already big time, but why not healthcare? Now we
mm,
have 2 or 3 times delivery to a pharmacy, especially here in Austria. I don't know what the rate is in the States, but a lot. I think the next step is that people are just going to get their stuff delivered directly at home, and why not, right?
yeah.
So to answer your question on what branches, I think almost all. Everybody that's doing something online will eventually go there. Do they need a 2L MFC or a small CFC, or do they need a huge DC? Well, unfortunately, I don't think there's a real one fits all answer to that. Everybody has a
Mm,
different region to work in, different demographic stuff, the whole infrastructure, where are your shops now, where's 80, 85% of your customers within that range, et cetera, et cetera. So you need to find a partner to discuss that with, a partner with experience,
mm,
to really figure out what is the best solution. And you know what? If you don't have enough orders yet, and you're just building up your marketing, and people are just getting used to buy your type of products online, I think automation is just not ready for you yet. You need a certain amount
mm,
of orders for it to make it worthwhile. Otherwise, you're just losing money. Having said that, if you have a certain amount of orders, automation is definitely sure there to give you that 3, 4, 5% margin, for example, in food retail.
mm. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a great perspective there because I think there is, opportunity. I mean, we see certainly where, certain stores are leveraging their brick and mortar space essentially as like a MFC too, right? And doing fulfillment out of them to be local in that sense. But I think that's a great point and kind of, ties the conversation all together. You got to look at the data in a sense, right? I mean, where your customers at and, how many orders are you getting and, what makes sense there to make that step. And, is there demand, right? Like, there's certainly something to be like, oh, we could, deliver your lipstick to you in 2 hours, right? But how many scenarios are there where you need lipstick in 2 hours? I mean, I have no idea. I don't wear
I,
lipstick. I'm
and I
sure
totally
you don't
agree
know
with
either,
you.
but
And I think, for example, from our point of view, we were naive there as KNAPP as well in 2019 and
mm,
20, where we just trying to sell that for every situation. Saying literally thinking, you have 200 orders a day now, but if you have this automation, it'll go up to 600. Well, guess what? It does not. A lot more comes
mm,
into play, exactly like you said. Uh, do the customers indeed need that speed? And if not, then maybe a different solution is better. So I totally agree with you. Doesn't fit all every
mm.
situation.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's very interesting to see how that's evolved because it was such a hot topic and certainly something that I think caught a lot of investment too in the investment space and these different companies trying to do micro fulfillment in different types of ways. So it's interesting to see how that's kind of changed and evolved a little bit. And even the idea of like, well, everybody wants everything right away. I think that that perspective has changed a little bit
Yeah,
too. And even though we saw Amazon kind of pushing that in a sense, I think that they obviously have the infrastructure to try
yeah,
and push those types of things. And then if you're just an e-commerce brand trying to jump in there and do the same type of thing, you certainly don't have that infrastructure and demand built up quite yet. So very interesting to talk to you here, Reese, and learn a little bit about your perspective. And I think the data side, all things point to data. I will say, and I think even in our discussion around MFCs, it certainly. Proves that as well. What does the data tell you that you should be doing, and what would make sense for your market and the customers that you're serving. So very interesting to talk to you here today and learn a little bit about this and what you guys are doing for the data side of things, and also the hyper local, highly automated MFC side of things as well. So if people are interested in getting in touch with you or learning more about KNAPP and what you're doing, what's the best way to do that?
yeah. Thank you very much for having me as well. It's always nice to talk about it, and I like to talk about it too much sometimes. So thank you for giving us that time. And yeah, I'll work on the marketing message for the automated solutions in the hyperlocal e-grocer market. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, man. I mean, this is supply chain. We love acronyms. We need an
We
acronym,
need a proper acronym. Yeah, we'll figure it out. Now it was, and we'll see where it goes. But I am convinced that this MFC CFC business is going to grow. It's not going to go as fast as we thought, but there's so many reports and so many people you talk to that say, well, actually, it's going to come. The pressure is not there yet. A 3, 4, 5% growth a year doesn't really justify that you immediately switch everything. But I guess being prepared, talk to companies like us, talk to people, figure out from what point on would it make sense and in what form would it make sense. That's one thing, and also the whole master data story, as you say. I mean, it's really my favorite topic, to be honest. I've been working in this for so long. Um, we have to figure it out. We have to figure out how we get better quality data and more attributes for this data in the whole supply chain far earlier on. And this can only be done by building bridges between suppliers, retailers, organizations like GS1, suppliers like KNAPP, and maybe even also end customers. I don't know.
Mm, yeah, absolutely. And what's the best way to learn more about KNAPP?
To learn more about KNAPP, well, you can give me a call, but we have an office in Atlanta where we have almost 800 people now. So they're more than happy to talk to you in the United States. We will be at ProMat, obviously, so people can come and visit us there. Or Logimat in Europe, if you want to talk there. Obviously, we have our website, but I think if you want to learn really more about where you are with your master data, uh, drop us a line and let's talk about a pilot project. It doesn't cost anything; it's for free. It's together with GS1, so it's a nice project. Takes about 3, 4 months, and then you get a really clear view on where you are with your master data when it comes to automation. That's something we offer. When it comes to automated solutions for hyperlocal e-grocery, I guess a conversation would be best as well. Just sit down, look at your order structure, look at what your plans are for the future, and then get a real feedback from our experience from the last 6, 7 years. What would make sense and what would not.
All right, great. And we'll definitely put information so people can easily find all of that
Understood.
at thenewwarehouse.com as well as in the show notes here. So, Reese, thank you very much again for joining me on the show today.
Thank you, Kevin. Have a great day.
Hey guys, thank you so much for tuning into today's video here on our YouTube channel, The New Warehouse Podcast, and I appreciate you tuning in. If you liked what you saw, make sure you subscribe to our channel, and if you like this video in particular, make sure you like it as well. And if you want to get this great t-shirt that you see in the video behind me, Warehouses Are Sexy, head to warehousesaresexy.com and get your own.